Hello and welcome to this week's Aftershow. I just covered a case that was solved through genetic genealogy, having been inspired by the Golden State Killer case. And most of us know Paul Holes as the cold case investigator who was on that team that identified Joseph DeAngelo as the Golden State Killer. The media around that solve launched a second career for Paul where he consults with law enforcement, he hosts television series like DNA of a Murder, and he co-hosts the podcast Murder Squad. But Paul's career started way before that and involved a lot more cases than the one he's most known for. And Paul wrote a memoir about it called Unmasked, My Life Solving America's Cold Cases, which is available now, and it tells his whole story. I was able to interview him for this after show ahead of the book's release, but I did have an advance copy. The first line of the book involves Paul ordering a drink, so my mind immediately went to, okay, this is what we're doing. We're going to lean into that hard-nosed detective trope. But as you will hear in the interview in a minute, the book soon takes you away from that and shows you the real toll of investigating crime scenes and seeing the worst of humanity, the impact that has on a person with their mental health and their relationships with those around them. I found the book surprisingly vulnerable. Most memoirs are vulnerable, but I didn't expect quite as much as he gave in this book, and you will hear me ask him about it. From a technical standpoint, the book has very good pacing. It stops and builds a scene on the cases, which is what true crime readers are going to appreciate. And it also does that on important moments in Paul's life, which memoir readers will appreciate. It doesn't linger anywhere it doesn't have to, so I never felt like I was getting bogged down in the book at any point. Unmasked, My Life Solving America's Cold Cases by Paul Holes is available pretty much everywhere, but I'm going to leave a link to bookshop.org in the show notes. On the site, you can click the Choose a Bookstore button before shopping. That allows you to select an independent bookstore in your area that will get a portion of the sale. So you get the ease of online shopping while still supporting local independent bookstores, which is very important. So without further ado, here's my interview with Paul Holes. In this book, you tell a lot of stories in a little bit of a snippet format, and you could have turned any number of them into a full-length true crime bestseller. So why did you choose to write a memoir rather than just straight true crime?
The book concept evolved because when I retired and DeAngelo was caught as being the Golden State Killer, I thought, well, everybody wants to know, the nitty-gritty about the Golden State Killer investigation. And there's fascinating aspects of the Golden State Killer and doing a deep dive. And as I got writing, and I brought my collaborator on board, Robin Gabby Fisher, an amazing writer, and she's trying to get to know me, and she's asking, me about my career. And I start, telling her about things that I've done. And I told her it's important, for me that people understand I've done so much more than Golden State Killer. I just have been in a very unusual position, in an unusual area during an unusual time that I experienced a lot of different types of cases and fascinating cases. And so we ended up kind of expanding from this being focused on Golden State Killer to other significant cases in my career. But as I'm talking to Robin, and now a publisher is on board, part of what they were sensing from me was the trauma that I've experienced in working these cases. And they were saying, we need to know more about the inner workings of Paul Holes. And I was very hesitant about that, to be frank. I'm a very private person. But as I started thinking about it and knowing what I've gone through, then that became really an important aspect to this memoir, is to really relay, the sacrifices that I've made to try to help others on these cases, but also to give an illustration of the sacrifices that other people doing this type of work have made. And that now is really where this memoir kind of cemented in, where it's talking about my career and the fascinating cases, and of course, including the Golden State Killer, but also just me, as a profession, and to give others an understanding as to what, it takes to do these cases. There's so many people that are trying to, these online sleuths that are trying to work cases from behind a keyboard, but that's so different than being in the bedroom of a little girl that has been shot in the head by her father. And it's now trying to relay those detectives, those crime scene investigators, those death investigators, the dispatchers that are receiving the calls. They are dealing with what I am calling real crime. And the book, the media that I'm involved with, it's the true crime genre. But there is a segment of the population that has that firsthand experience of interacting with real crime, and it leaves its impact on each of those individuals, whether they recognize it or not.
Was it so hard to be so vulnerable? You talk about anxiety, panic attacks. You even talk about something that I know for me is something that's sensitive for me to talk about, and it's a retrospective on my parenting. I have little kids, but I also have older kids, and that's hard to explore, where we didn't maybe do as much as we thought we should have done, or we made different choices. How did you get past that?
And that really was the most challenging aspect of writing this memoir, is what I call my failings, as a person, as a father, as a husband, just as a person. And some of that is just due to who I am naturally, and some of it is due to the career, the time challenges, as well as, the types of cases that, I was working. And to open up about that's where I had to do a lot of soul searching, because like the anxiety, nobody throughout the course of my career knew that I suffered panic attacks. In fact, one time I was driving and I was in the middle of a panic attack, and I literally thought I was dying and having a heart attack, and I drove myself straight to the emergency room. And now I'm calling my commander, who is my direct boss, saying, I'm in the hospital, I'm having my heart checked. But I'm not telling him I just had a panic attack, So now to put that out publicly, it is a challenge. But I think, again, it comes down to, well, what is the purpose of writing this memoir? And it really is to tell people, when you have these types of issues, it's okay to say you have these issues. It's okay to reach out and get help. And in part, the other professionals that are in law enforcement in whatever capacity, law enforcement can be very unforgiving. If you show weakness, minimally, you're going to get razzed by the other individuals. Worse, you may be shut off from promotions. You may not be getting certain specialty assignments. And so everybody has a tendency to bury, this, I can't handle what I just saw. We need to change that. That is really has become a very important message that I want the readers to get. And that gave me more courage to put that out there. And I'm getting older. I'm in my 50s now. I'm not thumping my chest, male-driven type of personality. I'm older, I'm wiser, I'm maybe a little bit more emotional and a little bit more gentle and empathetic than I used to be when I was in my 30s. And I think that contributes to me being more open about my insecurities and my issues, psychological issues, and relationship issues and everything that I've experienced over the course of my adult life.
So one of the things that I thought was interesting in the book is that you go through how your career evolved. And one of the things that I noticed was how detailed you are in how you look at a crime scene and think through it just step by step. But then you shift into this being drawn to cold cases, somewhere where the crime scene is long gone, and you're having to visit it through someone else's eyes, what someone else wrote down, what someone else decided to photograph. What drew you to cold cases when it seems crime scene analysis is one of your passions and strong points?
I definitely feel that, analyzing the crime scene and the behaviors that created that crime scene, to get insight into who the offender might be is a strong point of mine. And when it came to the cold cases, the primary driver, there really is two fundamental things that drew me to cold cases. Number one was the challenge. Here is a case that has been unsolved for decades oftentimes, and maybe multiple people have looked at it and they have not been able to crack it. And my ego is like, oh, I can solve this case. Let me see what I can do. It's stepping up, to meet that challenge. And then the second thing, and this is more on just a very personal level, is I'm typically drawn to cases usually involving some sort of predatory type behavior, whether it really is a serial predator or somebody who has just horrifically taken the life of a very empathetic victim. Most of the time it's women and children, but not necessarily. I have done male cold cases and I have attached to them. And thinking through, that analysis of the crime scene and what the victim is suffering in the last moments of their life, which is just horrific to think about, and then getting into the offender's mind to think what he is getting out of that crime, taking somebody's life, and now he's still very likely out there living a normal life. And that's like D'Angelo in Golden State Killer. When we finally caught up with D'Angelo, he had just literally retired from a second career as a truck mechanic. He had a hobby. He was going fishing with his friends. He was taking his grandkids around trick-or-treating. And he's been living a life for the last few decades that he doesn't deserve. And the audacity of that, really drives me. And then, of course, interacting with victims of his, rape victims of his, or the victims' loved ones of his homicide victims, and seeing that to this day, even 40 years later, the trauma that they suffered, it's like, no, they need an answer as to what happened. And this person needs to be taken off the street because he does not deserve that life. He needs to be brought to justice. And, that's really, those factors are what really drove me to focusing on cold cases. Of course, I was working active cases. They're absolutely horrific that I talk about in the book, some of them anyways. But the cold cases were something that I just developed, I think, a special expertise in.
Is there anything in the book that you think will surprise readers when they come across it? I have a few things in mind. I don't want to give too much away, but I'm wondering what you think would surprise them.
It's hard for me, from specific details as to what somebody might find surprising. I think everybody knows me, based on the heels of the success of helping catch D'Angelo as a Golden State Killer. And then they've seen that I've had this media career launch off, and the successes that have occurred because of that. But do they know who I really am? That's I think what this book is. And the title of the book, which I initially chose because it was unmasking who the Golden State Killer was. But then as that concept of the book evolved to what it is today, it's got a dual meaning. It's not just unmasking Golden State Killer. It's unmasking Paul Holes. And I think that's what the surprise is going to be, is they see, the photos of me or me on TV shows or listening to me on podcasts. But the reality is that I've got my struggles. I'm just a normal guy that has the various challenges everybody else has. And I'm opening up about what those challenges are.
I want to explore that for a second, this idea that, most law enforcement you're going to spend your career maybe getting a mention or two in the paper. If you become a household name, it's because you did something very, very bad. Now, that's not your career at all. You have moved from being law enforcement into the media celebrity. How do you deal with that change?
That was an extremely unexpected change. And to give a little bit of a story, years ago, when I was with the Sheriff's Crime Lab, a lab aide was asking me about this case, this East Area Rapist case I was working. So I was giving him the details, which for those that don't know, the East Area Rapist is the Golden State Killer case. It's just one of the phases. And I was telling this lab aide, this is the case I'm involved with. And he recognized it was a big case. He goes, wow, if you solve that, you're going to become famous. And I was like, okay, who solved the Green River Killer? Who solved BTK? Nobody recognizes, the investigators who put all that hard work in order to solve the case. So, when D'Angelo was caught and I'm at the press conference, there wasn't any thought that there was going to be any notoriety attached to me. I was just going to ride off into the sunset, into retirement, and at least have this feather in my cap. So the media attention that snowballed on me unexpectedly, it caught me off guard. And I'm a natural introvert, so to get out there and be on stage in front of, like a crime con that could be thousands of people, or be on TV shows or podcasts, that was quite a bit of anxiety that I was dealing with and still do deal with, though I'm getting a little bit more comfortable with it. And I, unfortunately, turned even more to my vices, alcohol, to give me the liquid courage in order to be able to handle this onslaught. And that's what I have to deal with today in terms of, okay, this is my new life. I need to figure out how I'm going to continue on this, because I recognize I've been given opportunities very few people have. And, I want to take advantage of those for personal reasons, as well as to use this as a pulpit in order to help others, other law enforcement professionals, bring attention to, victims who have lost loved ones, to be able to still do good, from this change. But I have to be able to handle it emotionally, psychologically. And it's a challenge with the anxiety and just being introverted.
I wanted to just get into a little bit on one of the cases you had in the book, because it's the case of Emin Bodfish. And I know you do have an Audible exclusive that covers that case called The Riddle of Emin Bodfish. So I'm just going to give a quick plug for that. Anyone over on Audible can listen to that. I don't know if it'll be released broadly. I know sometimes they release things, but definitely worth a listen. But one of the things that struck me about your discussion of the case in the book is that there were circumstantial reasons to suspect the son in that case. And many investigators believed that, but you saw it differently. You interpreted it differently. And is it difficult when you're in an investigation to be against the popular theory, against the popular position of the rest of the team? How do you navigate that?
It's difficult, but fortunately, like in that case, I was close to the two primary investigators on that case, and so we could speak freely. And to this day, they still make jokes about the difference of opinions in that case. And I've been involved in other cases where I have a different opinion than what is being expressed. Fortunately, within the region where I worked, I had built up a pretty solid reputation. So when I expressed an opinion on something, people at least took it under consideration. But that also meant that I had to make sure that I was on top of what I was saying. I wasn't just spouting off something, so I had to be very careful about when I did speak up. And so oftentimes, if I was in, let's say, a meeting, there's a lot of conversation going on for several hours. And then I finally will go, okay, I've heard enough. I've gathered enough. I've thought about it. I've chewed it over. I'm pretty confident what I'm about to say, versus just immediately, talking off the top of my head. So it is challenging when there's differences of opinion, but also coming out of the forensic field, that's where debating findings, debating scientific processes is somewhat of a natural occurrence. And I think that helps get into that mindset, that it's healthy to sit around and talk about different investigative theories, because this helps prevent the investigative team from tunnel visioning on the wrong direction. It helps keep an open mind. And as I talk about in the book, I personally have tunnel visioned, and I've learned from that. But having other people and other mindsets, other vantage points is important. I helped solve the Golden State Killer case. I didn't personally solve the Golden State Killer. And it's always that case. It's always a team effort. And that's what's important in any investigation, in any case.
So what is next for you? Do you have any other cases you're working on behind the scenes? Any media, books, podcasts, anything you don't have NDAs on, of course?
Yes, I am continuing to consult with law enforcement. There's several cases that I'm talking with various investigators on that I'm not allowed to talk about at this point in time. As far as the media side, I am now going to be in the CNN HLN family, and I will be hosting a series on HLN that will be announced shortly, and then possibly involved in multiple other TV projects and possibly other podcasts moving forward. So I'm going to be staying busy.
This hasn't been a very quiet retirement for you, has it?
No, not at all. I've done a lot of travel, which, on one hand, the travel, seeing parts of the country, interacting with people, working the cases from other parts and other parts of the country has been great. But also, I so enjoy being home. And the pandemic, as horrific as that has been for everybody, for me, that was my first break since I retired and Golden State Killer was caught.
I want to again thank Paul Holes for giving me some time out of his very busy schedule to talk about his book, Unmasked, My Life Solving America's Cold Cases. It is available now, and like I said, there is a link in the show notes of where you can buy it that will help support independent bookstores. As someone who's interested in true crime, I like to consider more than what happened and ask why. Why would someone kill? Is it something inside of them, something they're born with, or does something happen to make them a killer? On the podcast Killer Psyche Daily, host Candace DeLong works to answer those questions. Every weekday, you will hear a 10-minute rundown on the motivations and behaviors of the criminal masterminds, psychopaths, and cold-blooded killers you hear about in the news. Candace has decades of experience as a psychiatric nurse, FBI agent, and criminal profiler, and she draws from that experience to give you a deeper look into important topics. Things like the rise in teen fentanyl deaths, hate crimes performed by an incel, and breaking down the notorious Dartmouth murders. She also brings on expert guests to get even deeper insights into the details, and you'll hear new information on cold cases. Plus, she'll answer some killer trivia. So if you want insight into current cases and killers from the experts in 10 minutes or less, listen to Killer Psyche Daily on Amazon Music. Hey, Prime members, listen to the Amazon exclusive podcast Killer Psyche Daily in the Amazon Music app. Download the app today.